Step out of the car, he barked. Danielle didn't move. Her badge was inches away, sitting in plain view on the passenger seat, but Officer Maddox hadn't bothered to ask who she was. And now, with cold steel biting into her wrists and flashing lights painting the pavement red and blue, she realized this wasn't just a stop, it was a test of everything she'd spent her life standing for. Danielle Hayes wasn't wearing her badge. There was no blazer, no weapon at her side, just a soft cotton dress the color of dried cranberries, paired with worn leather sandals and a gentle scent of vanilla lotion that clung faintly to her skin. Her hair was pulled into a loose chignon, her makeup light, her mood settled. It had been a good afternoon. Her niece's 9th birthday had ended with laughter, a backyard cake cutting, and sticky-fingered hugs. And now, with the sun sliding low behind the trees of Stonecrest, Georgia, Danielle was nearly home. Only one turn left until she would be parked inside her garage, shoes off, sipping the mint tea she always made before bed. That's when she saw them, flashing red and blue lights pulsing behind her in the rearview mirror. For a moment, she blinked, unsure. Her speed was under the limit. No swerving, no missed signals. She hadn't even touched her phone except to check directions earlier. Still, she tapped her blinker, eased onto the right shoulder of the quiet residential road, and rolled her window halfway down. She wasn't afraid, yet. She'd been trained for this. She'd taught this. Protocol, posture, breath control. But there's a difference between knowing and living it. The moment Officer Grant Maddox approached, she felt it, that tight shift in the air. No greeting. No explanation. Turn off the engine. Hands on the wheel. His voice was clipped, devoid of curiosity. Danielle complied, slowly twisting the key, placing both palms high on the steering wheel. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" she said, tone level, eyes forward. "I'll be the one asking questions," he snapped, already circling toward the back of her vehicle. "Where are you coming from?" "A family gathering. My niece's birthday party." "You alone?" "Yes." She felt his eyes on her, assessing, scanning. Not listening, just searching for confirmation of a suspicion he hadn't yet voiced. Then came the line. "This vehicle matches a bolo. Possible suspect. And a theft reported 2 blocks from here." Danielle blinked. Theft? She hadn't stopped anywhere but her sister's house. Her jaw tightened, not in fear, but in familiarity. She knew this pattern. "May I show you my identification?" she asked, calm but firm. "Keep your hands where I can see them." His tone was sharper now, more rigid. She didn't flinch, but she didn't move either. Her fingers remained motionless. "My ID is in my wallet," she said, her voice deliberate. "It's on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach for it." "I didn't give you permission," he cut in. And just like that, the moment tilted. It wasn't about logic anymore. This was control. This was fear disguised as authority. Danielle felt it click inside her, that quiet, primal knowing that every Black American carries somewhere in their spine. The knowledge that what happens next could shift your life off course entirely. Still, she didn't argue. She didn't plead. She stayed exactly where she was. Maddox's backup hadn't even arrived yet, but he didn't wait. "Step out of the car," he ordered. Danielle breathed. "Officer, I'm reaching for my identification. Please listen to me." "I said out." He yanked the door open before she could unbuckle. She moved with caution, one hand at a time, movements slow enough to be read from a mile away. Her left foot touched pavement, then her right. She stood up, chin level with his collarbone. He didn't ask, he grabbed, spinning her roughly, pulling her arms behind her back with unnecessary force. The middle cuff snapped tight. Danielle said nothing. But her silence wasn't surrender, it was calculation. She'd been in war zones less tense than this. The second patrol car pulled up just as Maddox muttered into his shoulder radio, "Suspect detained." The female officer who arrived stayed near the curb, didn't approach. Just watched. Danielle stood there, wrists aching, the cold steel biting into her skin, her dress rustling softly in the wind. Maddox paced behind her, like a guard dog waiting for a reason. Female. Black. Early 40s. Driving a red sedan. Possible connection to robbery. Her compliance didn't make it into his notes. Her calm, her silence, none of it mattered. The other officer finally stepped closer, glanced at the cuffs, then at Maddox. Something passed between them, uncertainty, perhaps, but no one said a word. "Officer," Danielle said gently, "my identification is in the wallet on the front passenger seat. Please check it." "You'll stay right there until I say otherwise," Maddox barked. "I understand," she said, "but it might clarify things." Her voice was low, measured, an entirely different register than his. He hesitated, then stormed to the passenger side and threw open the door. She heard the rustle of papers, the sharp snap of the wallet opening, then silence. Long, heavy silence. What is this?" he finally stammered. There, gleaming in the soft dome light, was her badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Danielle N. Hayes. 15 years of service. Danielle didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The badge did the talking. Maddox turned slowly, his face pale. "Why didn't you say something?" "I did." The words dropped like stones. Not shouted, not spit, but clear, cutting. He stepped closer, flustered. Let's get these off you." She turned slightly, just enough for him to access the cuffs. Not because she trusted him, but because she wanted this part over with. He fumbled with the key, his hands shaking, the clicks metallic and awkward. As soon as the cuffs came off, she rubbed her wrists for just a second. The female officer stepped forward, voice soft for the first time. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Danielle turned her gaze toward her. "Physically?" "Yes." Maddox couldn't meet her eyes. He cleared his throat. "There's been a lot of theft in this neighborhood." "Your car matched what?" Danielle interrupted. "Was there a plate number? A make? A suspect? Description?" Silence. "You saw me," she continued. "You assumed. You escalated. And now you're embarrassed. Not because you were wrong, but because I had a badge." Maddox shifted, his posture crumbling. "You're right," he muttered. "I got it wrong." "No," she corrected. "You chose wrong. There's a difference." She didn't ask for an apology. She didn't need one. She walked back to her car, took out her phone, and snapped a photo of her wrists, red and dented. Then another photo, his nameplate. She didn't say what she planned to do. She didn't have to. Maddox knew. The badge sat open on the seat where he had dropped it. Her photo, her name, her title, unmistakable. She picked it up, not to flaunt it, but to reclaim it. This wasn't a shield. It was a symbol of the years she had poured into serving a country that, in this moment, had seen her only as a threat. Maddox hovered nearby, posture small. "Agent Hayes," he said, using her title now as if it could rewind time. I apologize for the inconvenience." Danielle paused. "Inconvenience," she repeated, like the word had betrayed him. Then, softer, "That's what this was to you?" "Sometimes we have to make fast calls," he tried. "Things move quick. You're trained to ask questions," she cut in, still calm. "To assess. To de-escalate. You skipped all of that." Maddox said nothing. Danielle turned to the female officer. "What's your name?" "Officer Julia Ramirez." "You saw what happened. You saw me comply. You watched him ignore procedure. Will you report this?" Ramirez looked torn, trapped between protocol and morality. I'll speak to my supervisor." Danielle nodded. Then turned back to Maddox. "Do you have any idea what could have happened here?" If I twitched the wrong way, if I raised my voice? Again, silence. She walked to her car, sat inside, and closed the door without a sound. The engine turned over quietly, the headlights blinking on. She didn't look back. But Maddox? He was still standing. Their arms limp, mouth pressed shut, watching her drive away like a man who had just realized a storm was coming and he had no umbrella. The marks were still fresh. Faint red rings, etched around her wrists like bracelets she never asked for. Danielle Hayes sat at her kitchen table the next morning, her palms cradling a steaming mug of black coffee. The silence in the house was absolute. No humming dishwasher, no morning news, no birdsong from the porch. Just quiet, heavy, and deliberate. She hadn't slept much. The moment Officer Maddox reached into her car and discovered who she really was had ended the encounter, but it hadn't ended the impact. Not by a long shot. Her wrists didn't ache from the cuffs, they ached from the memory. From what could have happened. From what almost did. On the table in front of her was a legal pad filled with notes, every word spoken, every command barked, every violation committed. Not just the procedural errors, though there were plenty of those. No Miranda, no clear probable cause, no explanation. But more than that, the choices. The assumptions. The dehumanizing tone that had reduced her from seasoned federal agent to nameless, faceless suspect. She wasn't angry. Not in the way people expected. She was resolute. Focused. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. By 9 a.m., she was in the Atlanta field office, her badge clipped neatly to her blazer, her steps even and controlled as she walked past agents she'd worked with for over a decade. Most of them had no idea that she had been handcuffed on the side of the road just 12 hours earlier by a man who didn't care enough to ask her name. She didn't stop to chat. She didn't need comfort. She needed action. She requested a meeting with Internal Affairs. No delay. No filters. No PR detour. She was ushered into a nondescript interview room, gray walls, cold metal chairs, a file folder already waiting on the table. The investigator assigned to her case was Special Agent Marcus Ellison, a tall, even-tempered man with kind eyes and a notebook already open. He didn't smile, didn't offer small talk. Just nodded. Once and said, "Let's begin." Danielle laid it all out. From the moment she saw the flashing lights to the second the cuffs came off. Her tone never wavered. She didn't embellish. She didn't need to. The truth, told plainly, was powerful enough. Ellison listened, his pen scratching steadily across the page. When she finished, he closed the notebook, exhaled, and leaned forward. "You're not the first person to mention Officer Maddox," he said quietly. Danielle's brow arched. "Go on." "His name's come up before, excessive stops, unjustified detainments. Mostly younger black men. A couple Latino women. One Navy veteran, believe it or not." Danielle's jaw clenched. "Any disciplinary action?" Ellison's pause was long enough to answer the question before he spoke. "A couple reprimands. Some counseling sessions. Nothing public. Nothing that stuck. So he's been protected. Let's just say," Ellison replied carefully, "his department hasn't been in a hurry to investigate their own." Danielle's voice was ice now. "Then let's give them a reason." The report was filed that afternoon: official misconduct, violation of civil rights, failure to follow procedure, and abuse of authority. Normally, an investigation like this would stay internal. Quiet. Contained. But this time, it didn't. No one knew where the leak came from: an anonymous tip, a forwarded email, maybe a junior officer who had finally seen enough. But the story broke fast. By the next morning, local headlines lit up: FBI agent wrongfully detained in her own neighborhood. Her name wasn't mentioned in the first article. But it didn't take long. Within hours, it was everywhere. Talk radio picked it up. Hashtags started trending. Protesters showed up outside Maddox's precinct holding signs. She had a badge. What if she didn't? And while some praised Danielle's poise, others accused her of playing the victim. She's using her status, one talk show host sneered. What about the real people who don't have a badge? Danielle didn't respond to any of it. She didn't post. Didn't tweet. Didn't grant interviews. But she did agree to speak at the community town hall meeting 3 days later. The invitation had come from the mayor's office, more PR bandage than genuine outreach, but Danielle saw it as something else, an opportunity. That night, the room was packed. Church pews filled with residents from every corner of Stonecrest, black, white, Latino, young, old, all of them watching as Danielle stepped up to the microphone in a simple navy suit, no makeup but a single line of eyeliner. Her voice was low, unhurried. And when she began, the room fell still. I'm not here as an FBI agent tonight, she said. I'm here as a black woman who followed every rule she was ever taught and still found herself in handcuffs on her own street. The silence thickened. No one moved. Let me be clear, she continued. This isn't about me having a badge. This is about what could have happened if I didn't. Because the truth is, if I hadn't had that ID on my passenger seat, I might still be standing on the side of that road. Or worse. A young man in the front row nodded, his arms crossed, eyes shining. Danielle went on. We tell ourselves these are isolated incidents. Bad apples. Unfortunate misunderstandings. But how many isolated incidents does it take before we admit it's a pattern? Her gaze swept the room. Officer Maddox didn't stop me because he had probable cause. He stopped me because he saw a black woman driving a red sedan after dark. He didn't de-escalate. He didn't ask questions. He assumed. She let the word hang. And his assumption could have ended in something irreversible. There was no applause when she finished. No standing ovation. Just silence, and then murmurs. The kind of murmurs that meant people weren't just reacting. They were thinking. After the town hall, she didn't return home. Not right away. She drove for a while, past the grocery store, the gas station, the local elementary school. Ordinary places. But now, every stop sign and traffic light felt like a reminder it could happen anywhere. Maddox was placed on administrative leave 2 days later. The department released a brief statement, sterile, evasive, clearly crafted by lawyers. We are reviewing the incident and take all allegations seriously. But people weren't buying it. Not this time. The clip of Danielle speaking at the town hall went viral. Grace under pressure, one headline read. She didn't yell. She didn't rage. She told the truth, and the world listened. Still, Danielle wasn't chasing the spotlight. She turned down invitations to appear on national news. Declined to comment for editorials. This wasn't about her brand. It was about the breach. About the hundreds, thousands, of people who'd had no badge, no voice, and no second chance. She remembered standing on that roadside, wrists burning, feeling the breeze through her dress and the eyes of the second officer just watching, and thinking, if I say the wrong word, if I make one wrong move, this ends differently. That night, she sat on her back porch with a pen in her hand and wrote 5 words across a blank sheet of paper. What if I wasn't me? That was the heart of it. That was the fire. And it had only just begun. Danielle didn't expect to become a symbol. She hadn't asked for that. All she wanted that night was to get home, kick off her sandals, and unwind after a day filled with cupcakes, balloons, and the laughter of children. But now, a week after that roadside encounter, she found herself at the center of something much larger. The file was open on her desk, a report thick with affidavits, disciplinary histories, and community testimonies, all connected to Officer Grant Maddox. His name wasn't a surprise anymore. What was surprising was how many people had been waiting for someone, anyone, to speak first. And now that Danielle had, the floodgates opened. It started with quiet emails. Then phone calls. Then handwritten letters. One woman, a school counselor in Decatur, wrote, "He stopped my teenage son last year. No reason. Just said he fit the description. My boy still flinches when he sees a patrol car." A retired Army medic said Maddox had searched his vehicle without cause, even after identifying himself. An elderly man in her own neighborhood left a voicemail that simply said, "Thank you for not letting this slide." Danielle read them all. Not because it was easy, but because it reminded her this wasn't about one night or one officer. It was about a system that had been allowed to overlook people like her. And people like them. The Department of Internal Affairs, under pressure from growing media attention and mounting evidence, launched a full investigation into Maddox's conduct. Danielle didn't celebrate. She didn't smile when she read the press release. Accountability wasn't justice. It was a beginning. She spoke with Ellison again, now leading a larger task force reviewing Maddox's stops over the last 5 years. "It's a mess," he said, not sugarcoating a thing. "But it's a mess we're finally unpacking." Meanwhile, Danielle was being asked to speak. First at a local university's criminal justice program. Then at a regional training for law enforcement officers. Then, unexpectedly, at a high school just outside Atlanta. "They need to hear you," the principal told her on the phone. "Not just because of what happened, but because of how you handled it." Danielle hesitated. She wasn't a public speaker. She wasn't trying to build a platform. But something in the principal's voice resonated. So she said yes. The auditorium wasn't large, but it was full. Teenagers slouched in their chairs, earbuds half hidden, arms crossed, eyes skeptical. Danielle stepped up to the podium with no notes and no slides. She didn't introduce herself with her title. She just said, "I want to tell you about a moment that could have gone very wrong. And why it didn't." She told them the truth. Not in headlines, not with drama, just plainly. About the stop. About the cuffs. About the silence. About the badge. And then she said what mattered most: "If I hadn't had that badge, I don't know how this would have ended." And that's what keeps me up at night. Because no one should need credentials to be treated like a human being. The room went still. The students didn't fidget. They didn't check their phones. They just listened. And when she finished, a young man near the front, maybe 17, maybe younger, raised his hand and asked, "So what do we do if that happens to us?" Danielle paused. Then answered, "You stay calm. You stay alive. And when it's over, you speak. You tell your truth. Loud enough that someone who can change things hears you." That answer would echo far beyond that gymnasium. Over the next several weeks, Danielle's life shifted. She was no longer just working cases, she was shaping policy. State legislators invited her to consult on new training programs aimed at de-escalation and implicit bias. The Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council added her to a subcommittee focused on civilian engagement protocols. She attended meetings in plain clothes, spoke quietly, but carried the weight of her experience like armor. Some officers resisted. Others listened. One sheriff from a rural district pulled her aside after a session and said, "We don't all agree with what happened. But we needed to hear you say it anyway." That was enough. At home, the calls continued. Parents, students, community leaders, even some cops. One detective she'd crossed paths with years earlier called and said, "You reminded a lot of us what the badge should mean." Through it all, Danielle stayed grounded. Her niece still called every Sunday. Her mother still reminded her to take care of herself. Her dog still barked at the same squirrel every morning. But inside, she had changed. She was no longer trying to move past the moment, she was moving through it and pulling others with her. Meanwhile, Maddox's world was unraveling. More complaints surfaced. Some had been buried, others ignored. Video footage from previous stops was recovered. Patterns became undeniable. His department, once defensive, shifted into damage control. Eventually, he was suspended without pay pending disciplinary review. He would face formal hearings. But Danielle wasn't focused on his downfall. That wasn't the goal. She wasn't here to destroy him. She was here to hold him, and the culture that enabled him, accountable. That meant making the system better, not just punishing its failures. And so, when invited to help develop a civilian advisory board for the Stonecrest Police Department, she accepted. She didn't just sit at the table, she helped rebuild it. Months passed. The firestorm cooled, but the movement didn't fade. Changes were implemented, new training modules, revised stop protocols, community liaison officers assigned to every precinct. And people remembered. Because Danielle had made sure they couldn't forget. One evening, as spring settled over Stonecrest, she sat on her porch, a glass of tea in hand, the sky washed in soft orange and lavender. A reporter had asked her earlier that week if she ever regretted speaking out. She hadn't answered then. But sitting there now, wind tugging at the hem of her dress, she smiled faintly to herself and whispered into the dusk, not once. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't fought back with fists. She had told the truth, and that had been enough to rattle a system. To inspire change. To remind people that dignity isn't earned. It's owed. Her voice hadn't just pierced through a patrol officer's assumptions. It had echoed across precinct walls, into classrooms, into policy, into hearts. Danielle Hayes didn't set out to become a symbol. But when the world tried to silence her, she spoke anyway. And because she did, others would, too. Sometimes, the most powerful stand you can take is the one made in complete silence, until the moment the truth needs to be spoken. Danielle Hayes didn't scream. She didn't resist. She didn't retaliate. But she also didn't let what happened to her be swept aside or rewritten by anyone else. She chose to confront injustice not with anger, but with undeniable truth, and that made all the difference. This story isn't just about one woman who happened to carry a badge. It's about the dangerous ease with which people can be misjudged based on nothing more than their appearance. It's about how deeply rooted biases can turn everyday encounters into moments of threat, and how those in power must be held accountable not just when the damage is catastrophic, but the moment the trust is broken. Danielle had a badge, but what if she didn't? That's the question we all need to sit with. Because dignity, respect, and fairness should never be conditional. They shouldn't depend on rank, job title, or professional status. They should be automatic. They should be human. If there's one thing to take from her story, it's this: speak up, especially when it's hard. Use your voice, your platform, your presence to demand better, not just for yourself, but for those who might not have the strength or the protection to do it yet. Don't underestimate the ripple effect of standing your ground with grace. You never know who's watching, learning, and finding the courage through your example. To our listeners here on U.S. Instructive Stories, thank you. Thank you for showing up, for listening, for thinking deeply, and for sharing these powerful narratives that reflect the real struggles and triumphs of everyday people across this country. These stories matter because you choose to pay attention. And we are honored to have you on this journey with us. If Danielle's story moved you, we encourage you to reflect on how you show up in your community. How do you use your voice? Are you listening when someone speaks up about injustice, or are you staying silent? Change doesn't happen in echo chambers. It begins in uncomfortable moments, in hard conversations, and in the courage to act. Let's keep going. Let's keep listening. Let's keep speaking truth until it no longer needs to be shouted to be heard.